Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by InfoTrust on November 13th, 2019. Today's topic for today's webinar is Google Analytics versus Google Analytics 360. So without further ado, let's get started. First, I do want to go through just a few housekeeping things. First, I just want to make sure my audio is loud and clear. So if you can hear me and see the screen share, if we could just type yes, that would be extremely helpful. It looks like we are good to go. So thank you for those that quickly responded. So without further ado, I also want to mention we are recording this webinar. So afterwards, we'll send out a recording link. We will also send out the slide deck. So don't feel like you need to constantly take notes. Usually you'll retain what I'm saying better if you're listening and paying attention. Today's webinar should be around 30 to 40 minutes long, so it won't take up too much of your time. There will certainly also be time at the end for Q&A. And as you come up with questions, please post them in the question panel. And as I mentioned, after the presentation, I will get to those questions. There's a good chance if you ask a question early on, it might get answered throughout the presentation, so I probably won't address questions until the very end. And I did just want to note that today's webinar is mostly focused on Google Analytics 360 features and the differences between Google Analytics and Google Analytics 360. So we are going to be assuming that you kind of know what Google Analytics Free is. We have had other webinars and plenty of topics you can check out other content on if you're just curious about Google Analytics. So going into this webinar, I'm just assuming most people have a general feel of what Google Analytics Free is. So we're really going to be more or less comparing the differences between Google Analytics and Google Analytics 360. So your MC for today is myself, Jimmy Love. I'm a lead analytics consultant. I've been with InfoTrust for about 7 years, and I've been a web analyst for 5 of those 7 years. So hopefully I'm able to share some of the knowledge I've gained about Google Analytics and Google Analytics 360 with the folks on this call. Now, it would not be a webinar in 2019 if I didn't at least give you guys some background on InfoTrust, what we do. So I'll just do a slide or two on that. InfoTrust is a digital analytics consultancy. We are based and headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio. That is where I am located, and that is where I am presenting from today. We also have offices in Chicago, Barcelona, and Dubai. So we are very much a global analytics organization. And our emphasis is accurate and providing confident, accurate data for our clients. And in addition to just implementation and analytics reporting, we do certainly offer many other services from data governance, compliance, security, to integrations, data science, automation. So we have a lot of different teams with a lot of different skill sets, and it's certainly more than just analytics implementation and reporting and support. So certainly wanted to explain that. And we also have a partnership with Google. So majority of our clients are on the Google ecosystem. And here's just a few of the products we support and some of our certifications. We are also partners with BlueConic, a customer data platform, SessionCam, a session recording software, Salesforce, a small CRM you may be heard of out of San Francisco, and Tag Inspector. I wouldn't really call us partners with Tag Inspector because we actually developed Tag Inspector in-house. So hopefully you've heard of Tag Inspector. And in a few slides today, we will also describe how Tag Inspector can also help with some of our work with our clients and some of our other services, including Analytics 360. So I do want to also explain our differentiation between ourselves and maybe some of the other analytics agencies out there. So one of which is the fact that we do have a proprietary technology called Tag Inspector. And I mentioned our focus is giving our clients accurate and actionable data. And in order to ensure a client's data is accurate, it is very helpful to scan their website and ensure certain technologies such as Google Analytics are on every single page. So Tag Inspector can certainly do a lot more than that, but one of its key value-added components is its crawling technology and ensuring a software like Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager is present on every page, so that when you're analyzing data in GA, everything from sessions to bounce rate, some of those key metrics are in fact accurate. We have a lot of experience, so we work with numerous Fortune 500 companies. We support over 6,000 websites every year, so you're definitely not working with any newbies in the industry. We are able to offer global support by having offices in the US and also Spain and United Arab Emirates. And I mentioned we are certainly Google partners, but we are in fact analytics and TMS, tag management, agnostic. So while we primarily work with Google, we also have clients working with Adobe. And while we primarily work with Google Tag Manager for tag management, we also work with Telium, Signal, Adobe Launch, pretty much all the major players in the analytics and tag management space. And I think one of the biggest differentiators, and I think it's probably the most important, is the fact that we actually are not a media agency. So we do not run any sort of ads for clients on Google ads, search ads, display ads, video ads. We simply do not run ads for our clients. So when they come to us with questions about, where to potentially spend more marketing dollars or which channels should be a focus during the holiday season, we're able to provide an unbiased view into what we truly think you should be investing in based on what the data says and not based on what we're trying to sell you as media management services. So I think that unbiased view is an important differentiator and why we are proudly purely in the analytics space and not also the media space. And before we get started, so I did just want to ask a quick question to the audience, and there'll be one or two other questions throughout the presentation as well. And I just wanted a quick idea of those of us on this webinar as to what technology are you using today? So there should be a poll that you can answer, and let's see. Okay, so hopefully we're back on the slides. So curious if those of you are using Google Analytics free, Google Analytics 360, Adobe Analytics, or potentially a different solution. So we will review some of those poll results as we continue through the presentation, but thank you for those that are responding. And with that, I think let's just go ahead and get right into it. So I think at this point, the poll is closed. So actually, while we're on the screen, it's a good segue to look at the results. So it does look like about half of us are using Google Analytics free, which is very expected. I'm sure that half is wondering what benefits would I bring to the organization if we upgraded. Looks like about a third of us are using Google Analytics 360 already, so that's awesome. And maybe I'll show you a thing or two you may not have known about Google Analytics 360. A few of us are using Adobe Analytics, which is awesome. That's an amazing tool as well. And if those of you hopefully attended last week's webinar on comparing Google Analytics 360 with Adobe Analytics, as there are a lot of pros and cons and differences between those platforms. Looks like no one else is using any of the other analytics solutions, and a few people do not have any analytics solutions. So hopefully, at least by the end of this webinar, I can convince you to use Google Analytics free, because there is not really a good reason not to have any analytics platform on your website. And the last thing I want to just explain is, while this presentation will mostly be describing what the differences are, I do want people to kind of take a step back and think, why is this decision so crucial or critical for my organization to make? So some of the questions you should be maybe asking yourself or asking your internal teams will be things like, what are the reporting needs of our organization? Are we prepared to handle reporting internally? Or are we looking to outsource this? Are we will custom dashboards, perhaps Data Studio, Tableau, something along those lines be necessary? Or are we able to handle it in-house, as I mentioned? Are integrations important? Is marketing and advertising integrations with Google Analytics something important for us to focus on as an organization, and also, what is our roadmap? So what is our long-term strategy with analytics? So answering those questions why internally should probably be your first focus before you really determine what tool makes the most sense for you. All right, so prepare to screenshot this next slide as it's very important. All right, so hopefully you're able to get that slide screenshotted. It's the last time I'm going to share it. Totally joking, so we'll go back to it. So this is very high level. If you're going to take anything away, this slide is probably the easiest one pager you're going to get out of this presentation. I was unsure whether I should share it, but I do think it is useful to just take this high level view. Certainly we're going to be diving into these in much greater detail, but did want to showcase just high level kind of what Google would describe as what one platform has versus what the other one. And I think the only thing I'll say about this slide is really that very first row, and that is the target audience. So if you are a small or medium business, maybe under 100 employees, and you have maybe just one website, and you just have a few thousand visitors a month, Google Analytics will probably suffice for everything that you need. But if you are a more advanced enterprise, you're a larger organization, maybe your software and advertising budgets are in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars per year, then that is where a tool like Google Analytics 360 may not only be suggested, but may almost be required for you to truly succeed in the digital space. So just very high level, if you are a very small or medium business, I don't want you to leave the webinar. You should still stick around and learn about Google Analytics 360, but just being perfectly transparent, it's probably not the best tool for your organization. And we'll certainly go into the cost, pricing, and reasons why. But anyone else, maybe with larger marketing and advertising and analytics budgets, that's where you're really going to look into some of these features that we'll be talking about today. And the first we're going to go through, before we take a deep dive into the other features, I think arguably one of the most important differences between the tools are the native integrations that Google Analytics and Google Analytics 360 have. So Google Analytics out of the box has an integration with Google Ads, AdSense, Ad Exchange, Search Console, native remarketing integrations with Google Ads. And that typically will suffice for that smaller and medium-sized business. Where Google Analytics 360 really differentiates itself is the native integrations with all of the same tools as Google Analytics Free, but also Search Ad 360, Display Video 360, Campaign Manager, Google BigQuery, Salesforce. So really all of the above are those enterprise tools where a more advanced analytics platform should really become a strong consideration if you're using any of these tools. So just a quick breakdown, because those are a lot of tools that you may not have heard of. First, Google has rebranded a lot of their products. In fact, it's probably worth mentioning that Google Analytics 360 is formerly known as Google Analytics Premium. So if you've heard that term before, Google Analytics 360 is Google Analytics Premium. Search Ads 360, if you've ever heard the term double-click search, that has now been rebranded as Search Ads 360 or SA 360. Double-click Bid Manager has been rebranded to be called Display Video 360. Campaign Manager, you've maybe heard of double-click Campaign Manager. They just kind of slashed the double-click. You can kind of tell they're really removing that brand and really want you to be aware that all of these tools are in the Google ecosystem, and more importantly, in that 360 ecosystem, as you've probably seen with the name of SA and DV 360. BigQuery, as far as I know, has not really undergone any sort of rebranding, but it's been a tried and true data warehouse for using Google's infrastructure for SQL queries. And like I mentioned, that small company in San Francisco called Salesforce is also a cloud-based CRM that has a native integration with Google Analytics 360. That's actually one of the most recent integrations of this list, and should also be something, if you're using Salesforce I'll explain why a little bit more later, but that's certainly a tool that an integration with 360 might be very helpful for your organization. So on those lines, I want to go just into a little more benefits of the values of those integrations, because integrating different software technologies sounds very interesting, sounds like something, it's kind of more of a buzzword these days, but I want to explain sort of some of the insights and some of the values that these integrations bring. So first and foremost, Google Analytics 360 will then become your centralized platform to compare metrics across channels and touch points. So we're trying to essentially get all of your marketing data in one place versus bouncing back and forth between a variety of tools. When you integrate some of your advertising software like search ads and display video with 360, not only are new custom reports available to you under the acquisition section of Google Analytics, you will also have Google Analytics metrics available for you in Search Ads 360 and Display Video 360. So I mentioned I've been with InfoTrust for 7 years. 5 of those was an analyst. The few years prior, I was actually more in the advertising space before InfoTrust became analytics agnostic, and before we completely left the media space. And some of those metrics that Google Analytics provides in your advertising tools include metrics like bounce rate, session duration, pages per session. Some of those metrics can be key to optimizing campaigns, and sometimes that's kind of an overlooked benefit of those integrations. And then also the audiences that you create in Google Analytics 360 can be retargeted to in DV 360. That's obviously enormous. For those of you who aren't aware, but how you create audiences, essentially anytime you've ever created a segment in Google Analytics, you've essentially created an audience. So it's as easy as creating a segment. In fact, if you create a segment, you can actually go into audiences and import segments that you've previously created for reports. Talk about this certainly more a little bit later, but some of the common audiences you might have would be cart abandonments, or users that saw certain pages but never downloaded the white paper, or never fulfilled those high value actions on your websites. Those are the users that you might want to retarget to, and the audiences you can create in Google Analytics 360 are much more powerful and much more customized than anything you can do by simply placing retargeting pixels on websites. These types of integrations, specifically BigQuery, give you raw data, and every single hit that comes to your website is stored in BigQuery and allows you to do all kinds of advanced analyses. And of course, when you're using a single point of truth, everything like from attribution will certainly become more impactful, as you can close the loop on sales and marketing efforts and import offline data into Google Analytics and import Google Analytics audiences and segments into Salesforce. So there's a two-way road with the with the Salesforce Sales Cloud and Marketing Cloud integrations that are recently available with 360. So next, I do want to go into a more deep dive. So we've talked about integrations. I think those are key. And I wanted to throw that out first, because if you're using any of those tools, that's really where a Google Analytics 360 arrangement might become very pivotal to your organization's marketing efforts. But there are certainly many, many other features. So beyond integrations, now we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive. So first and foremost, unsampled data. This might be one of the biggest, probably the second largest reason for users making the upgrade to 360, besides the integrations, would be the very, very frustrating yellowish orangish check mark that you'll see at the tops of reports, and you can see one in the screenshot on your screen. And whenever you see that check mark, you know that your data, unfortunately, is being sampled. So that generally means it's a little bit less reliable. They're trying to make inferences on a small sample of data and trying to tell you what the larger, what your actual website is, what's actually happening on your website. But that generally does not suffice for marketers that are looking for, you don't want to be making assumptions or inferences. So when you'll see sampling is if you're looking at a report with over 500,000 sessions, whereas with Google Analytics 360, that sampling threshold increases to 100 million sessions. So a pretty enormous difference there, and you'll basically rarely start seeing that very annoying check mark that you see at the tops of reports. In fact, many users of Google Analytics Free, which is about half of those on this webinar right now, may not have even ever looked for that check mark, and they may have actually already reported on data that was sampled and not truly accurate. So sampling can be a huge headache, and the best way to get around that is the upgrade to 360. And if you are seeing sampling, that probably means you are one of those organizations that have too much website traffic and you're not able to get all the data you need out of the free version. Now, even with Google Analytics 360, you can still experience sampling. So there are 3 ways of getting around that. You can either download an unsampled report. You can build a custom table in Google Analytics if there's an ongoing report that you constantly want to have unsampled, then that's another option for you. And then of course you can also use that raw hit level data in BigQuery. And regardless of the route you go, those three routes are all 360 only features. And then as far as data sampling and data size, with 360, you can export up to 3 million rows into a report, which is a stark contrast with the free version, which is 50,000. So now that you know what that check mark looks like, I would encourage you all to log into your analytics platform, maybe look at some of your common reports, maybe look at what the common maybe date range comparisons you look at, and see if you're seeing that check box as a green check mark, meaning no sampling, or that yellow-orange check mark, meaning you are experiencing sampling. Data freshness being another huge benefit of Google Analytics 360. So maybe you're an organization that wants to keep a close eye on a flash sale or a Black Friday sale, Cyber Monday sale with the holidays coming up. Maybe you want to see how an email campaign is impacting site traffic in real time. That is available with Google Analytics 360. Most reports are updated and the data is fully accurate and refreshed within just 10 minutes to an hour. And your service level agreement, which I'll talk more about later, actually guarantees less than 4 hours for any report in GA360. And now they say 4 hours. We've almost always seen accurate data in sub 2 hours, unless you are one of the largest websites that we've ever worked with. So you're typically going to see accurate data within 10 minutes to an hour, usually no more than 2 hours, which allows you to respond to traffic and maybe coupon codes, maybe website issues in a much more expedited real-time fashion, compared to the free version, which if you're ever looking at the day, today's data, or potentially sometimes even yesterday's data, it is not reliably accurate until between 12 and 48 hours have passed. Typically 12 to 24 for your medium to large sites, and 48 hours if you're an enormous website that is still using free GA. But 12 to 24 hours is not a threshold of time to easily respond to a failed campaign or understand how certain marketing efforts are working on your site in real time. So next, we'll talk about another key component of a key difference between GA and 360, and that is the number of dimensions and metrics. So with free version, you do have 20 available to you, dimensions and 20 custom metrics. And being fully transparent, I haven't seen too many clients ever go over 20 custom metrics, but the 20 custom dimensions is where things can get very interesting. And we've certainly seen clients with well over 100 custom dimensions that are all actively capturing important data that the marketing, analytics, and business team needs to know. So the additional 180 custom dimensions can be an enormous factor in your decision for 360. And I've actually never seen anyone come as high as 200. So I do like to say those custom data fields are essentially limitless in terms of what you can capture about your products, your users, your website interactions, anything that's not out of the box GA dimension. We can obviously set up as a custom dimension. Another 360 feature that has an enormous impact on the decision, and I've seen being utilized much more recently, has been custom funnels. Similar to the Salesforce integration, it's one of the newer features that has been rolled out to 360 organizations. And if you've ever been in the free version of GA, and maybe you're hopefully you have it, if you're an e-commerce website, hopefully you have enhanced e-commerce, maybe you've seen the shopping behavior funnel or the checkout behavior funnel. Kind of looks like this screenshot where you can see where people are dropping off in the checkout flow. And custom funnels are similar to that, except for you can use them for anything you want. So maybe you want to see how users that visit the blog or watch a video impact likelihood to add a product to cart or make a purchase, as is in this example. So anything you could possibly think of, there's countless examples of non-e-commerce related use cases. But this one, e-commerce is sometimes a little easier to understand, and you basically trying to figure out what are some of the inefficient touch points on your website that are causing users to not perform those high value actions that you're interested in capturing. And arguably the coolest thing about custom funnels, which is very similar to the checkout funnel where you get some data on cart abandonment and things like that, is the ability to remarket to users that hit certain steps but abandoned, or like I said, maybe users that added a product to their cart or left. So the ability to re-engage with these users and create audiences out of these funnel abandonment steps is very, very powerful for your advertising team to get a lot of bang for your buck. Oh, I laugh every time I see that stupid GIF. But another big difference is going to be the properties and views that you have available to you. So with the free version of Google Analytics, you have 50 properties per account and 25 views per property, which again should suffice for your smaller, medium-sized business. There's only so many ways you can splice the data into views, and maybe 50 properties is plenty at the account level. But with 360, you have those maybe enterprise organizations, you have a lot of multi-site, multi-brand organizations, CPG type of organizations, maybe you're a media organization with a lot of different brands or sites or channels. That's where 360 might be, the 360 features of the properties and views you have available to you might be the difference between why you might want to upgrade. With 360, you can have up to 200 properties per account and 400 views per property. So you can splice and slice the data in just about any way you want using filters or different view level settings to differentiate different views and provide views for any department in your organization. So I'd like to almost call it limitless as far as views and properties go at the account level. And last but most certainly not least is out-of-the-box roll-up reporting. So roll-up reporting is aggregating data from different properties and viewing all of it in the same reports. So oftentimes you want to maybe look at all of the properties of a specific market. If you are a global organization, you want to see all of your USA data, USA market data in one property. That would be a great example of a roll-up property. Or maybe you simply want to see data from your mobile site, your desktop site, your Android app, and your iOS app in one view. That'd be an outstanding use case of a roll-up property. Roll-up properties include data from web and app, as I just mentioned, and there's also session unification will occur. So if a user is on your desktop site and on your mobile site, for example, and they have the same client ID or user ID because they've logged in, then they will show up as one unique user. So you do get unification, you do not get duplicates in those situations when you have a true roll-up property. So that, like I said, for your multi-brand CPG global organizations or users, maybe sites or organizations with a few different brands or a few different websites that they want to combine into one stack, roll-up reporting does just that. We mentioned integrations. I just want to remind you, because this is sort of in the detailed section of the 360 features, I can't, just can't express enough how important some of these integrations are and some of the value and insights you get when you have metrics from these tools in GA and vice versa. And next, I do want to talk about service level agreements. SLAs are very fun, very lawyer heavy types of agreements. But for an enterprise organization, you do want to have data reliability. You are essentially, it's a paid tool. We'll talk about pricing next. So you want to know, I want some guarantees that if I'm giving Google, in this case, money, that I will get a good return on my investment, and then I can have some assurances that I have the data that I'm paying for. So with your SLA that you get with Google Analytics 360, Google guarantees an uptime percentage of at least 99.9%, often even higher. The reporting UI will be available at an uptime percentage of 99% as well. And then that fresh data guarantee of 4 hours, 98% of the time, is very useful, and certainly we've seen it often 1 to 2 hours and often closer to 100%, except for those sites with potentially billions of hits per month. So, what does all this mean? It's just basically Google's guarantee to you that we will give you fresh, accurate, reliable data 24/7, 365. So, as you may have determined or inferred on your own, Google Analytics 360 is not a free service, and that's why it's really recommended for those larger to enterprise size organizations. It starts at around exactly, I should say, 150,000 a year, which covers 500 million hits per month. For most websites out there, even larger enterprise organizations, that often is enough. But there are more expensive licenses. I'm not going to go into all the details that should follow up for those types of questions, but there are licenses available that can cover you up to 20 billion hits per month. So there are a variety of 360 tiers. And just so hits is not maybe the most common terminology. So a hit is essentially either a page view or an event. Anytime there is a call made to a Google server, that is considered a hit, and calls are made to Google servers when an event fires, like a scroll tracking event or a video event, or of course when a new page view fires. So those are hits, and if that's a way of calculating how many hits your organization has in a given month. Maybe you can look at October 1st through October 31st and look at the total number of event hits and total number of page views. That'll give you an idea of what your hits are per month. If you're under 500 million, then your license would be 150K per month. Google Analytics Free is not surprisingly completely free, so that's very nice. And whether you're considering free or 360, for the 11% of you that do not have an analytics tool right now, highly recommend you start with free. I wouldn't want you to just dive into the world of Google Analytics 360 without giving some exposure to the free version to your marketing team, your advertising team, your sales team, your business leadership team. They should all be aware of what is available in Google Analytics out of the box before you ever consider making that upgrade. And moving right along to platform implementation. So implementation is very, very simple. Basically, you can contact a Google partner. InfoTrust happens to come to mind when I think of Google partners, and basically work with that partner and work with Google, and they essentially flip the switch. So it's a very, very simple upgrade. There is a bonus when you upgrade of you do get a year of unsampled data backfilled into Google Analytics, so you can essentially immediately start doing year-over-year comparisons. That can be huge, and I absolutely love that part of the upgrade. So if you're not sure, well, we should have done this a year ago. Why didn't we do it then? Well, you can actually do it now and still get that data backfilled. You do not need to retag any of your websites. So it literally is a switch flip, if you will. So when you're upgrading to 360, the tracking code remains the exact same. Your Google Analytics property IDs remain the exact same. So it's very, very easy. Of course, if you're using Google Tag Manager, the Universal Analytics or GTag in GTM does not need to be changed. So basically, once you complete that agreement, you are immediately able to enjoy the unsampled data moving forward and up to a year back in time. You have the data freshness, all of those advanced integrations, funnels, and everything we've talked about becomes available to you immediately once you make the upgrade. So a few things as far as what's included with the partnership. So we've mentioned what's included with 360, unsampled data, data freshness, an SLA, integrations. When you work with InfoTrust, you'll also get dedicated account management, support representation. You'll get ongoing implementation and support, and certainly also available access to our other suites of tools and our other teams, like our data science team, engineering team, integrations team, tag management team, all of that kind of stuff. So lots of advantages of using a partner like ourselves, and the price is the exact same. It's still $150,000 a year. And then just a few more details about a relationship with InfoTrust. I mentioned support. So you are given 15 hours a month. You and your team are given 3 hours of training per quarter, similar to training like this. We oftentimes can even do it in person. We've worked with multi-brand organizations in the media space, CPG space, and some of the largest brands globally. So we definitely have experience with small, medium, and large enterprise organizations. We offer tag inspector scans, which is absolutely huge because you can't rely on your data without knowing that it is accurate, and you can't be assured that your data is accurate without knowing that Google Analytics is on every single page of your website. So we also might help you identify, Tag Inspector can also help identify tags that you might want to remove because you're no longer using, bogging down your site. A lot of perks to Tag Inspector. Encourage you to check that out, whether or not you work with InfoTrust for your Google Analytics needs. We have a dedicated team. We are available at all hours of the day since we have a global presence. And we don't want to be thought of as a support or a implementation team. We want to be thought of as a partner, and we truly have teams to help you with anything you could want, from data science to automations to integrations. So kind of talked about that a little bit. And last but not least, I think we're doing great time-wise. We'll be wrapped up in just a few minutes and then get into Q&A, because we're just going to chat quickly about next steps. Want to let you know about some of the other free things we have available for you. So if I kind of mentioned, this presentation is about the what. So what are the differences between Google Analytics and Google Analytics 360? But really, you need to be thinking about the why. Like, why should we invest? When should we invest? What are the steps to analytics maturity? And we do have a really cool webinar that's on this, and when the slides are sent out afterwards, you can click that link and it'll take you to that webinar, or you can type in the 6 Ps of digital analytics transformation into Google and you'll find us. But I think this is a fascinating webinar that'll help you along your analytics journey, and then determine if and when which technologies make the most sense. 2 other webinars I want to plug. I think they're both fascinating. We obviously have we try to vary our topics, so we haven't done a webinar on 360 in a while, so that's why we're here today. Last week we did one on Adobe Analytics, comparing it to Google Analytics 360. Next week we have one on last-minute Black Friday analytics tips for retailers, and we have one on cookie consent, led by our Tag Inspector product manager Lucas Long. And anything related to e-privacy, GDPR, CCPA, some very scary legal terms, but things that you absolutely need to be aware of if you're collecting data about users on your website. That's a great webinar to check out as well. So all of that can be found at infotrust.com/events. And like I said, these slides will be shared, so these links should be clickable when we're sharing those slides. So last, just want to throw out another poll. So if anyone is interested in having us follow up with you about our services or help answer additional questions that we may not have covered in today's webinar, please reach out to us. And looks like the poll is collecting responses. So yeah, so as people are responding to that, looks like we're getting some yeses and some does, so that's awesome. We'll follow up accordingly. And with that, that kind of wraps things up for today. So I promised you it'd be between 30 and 40 minutes. I was off by 3 minutes as we ended up going over to 2:43 Eastern, but I'll call it close enough and call it a success. So with that, we can kind of go into Q&A. But yeah, so for those of you that would like to stick around, please do as we go through any questions that came up. And yeah, so just stay tuned one moment for those. All right, so my colleague Amanda is joining me as we go through a few of these questions.
Do I have to contact a Google partner to buy Analytics 360, or can I just go to Google?
Great question. So you actually can go directly to Google. They are often actually going to then send you to a partner. So they're, just being fully transparent with you, the cost is the exact same. It'll be $150,000 either way. By going through a partner, which Google may even actually directly recommend you do, then you will, certainly ourselves and probably our competitors as well are going to offer things like support. With InfoTrust, you'll have access to Tag Inspector, you'll have access to, our data science team, engineering team, automation team, integration team. So I think there's a lot of benefits to going through a partner, but you can technically buy a license straight through Google. But again, a lot of our current 360 clients were references from Google because we work so closely with so many reps at Google. So great question.
Next question is, at 150,000, do I get support from Google too, or only a Google partner?
Good question. You do get both. So certainly your Google partner I would recommend would be your first place to go. And certainly with InfoTrust, you have around 15 hours of support where we can help answer questions. We obviously have a direct line to Google if it's something that we can't even answer. But with Analytics 360, and I maybe should have mentioned this in the presentation, you do have the ability to call a Google Analytics support rep or chat with a support rep directly through the Google Analytics UI. Whereas if you are using the free version of Google Analytics, there's really no way to get through Google Analytics support. They're basically going to direct you to their support pages. So you do have access to Google Analytics support via the UI. Certainly your partner would probably be able to answer any of your questions you have as well, though.
Right. Is there more and more data sampling to combat what Safari and Firefox are doing with ITP?
So that's a great question with a pretty complex answer. So essentially, ITP is preventing you from collecting some data from some of your Firefox and Safari users that have opted into this intelligence tracking prevention. So I guess you could kind of therefore insinuate that your analytics data is slightly sampled since you're missing a few users. Keep in mind, you've always missed some users. Google Analytics never captures 100% of users. If anyone's on the Tor browser or have JavaScript disabled, we're not tracking those users anyways. So the very privacy-centric folks amongst us are definitely aren't being captured in analytics platforms now and haven't been in the past. But as far as ITP goes, there actually are more workarounds than you think, and they are perfectly legal. There are ways of using first-party cookies instead of third-party cookies, and we actually have a very talented engineering team that has developed some of those workarounds, and we're kind of happy to follow up with you there. But Yeah, again, that's a very complicated question that you could almost host an entire ITP could actually be the topic of an entire webinar, and Amanda's taking notes on that right now for our webinar series in 2020 because I think it's a great topic. So hopefully that helped answer that.
All right, it looks like the last question is, can I bundle Optimize 360, Surveys 360, etc. with Analytics 360?
You guys are asking awesome questions. The answer is yes. So Optimize 360 and Surveys 360 are not free additions in the marketing platform. It is worth noting, and I didn't mention it today because there's not a huge difference between Tag Manager and Tag Manager 360, but with your Google Analytics 360 license, you do have access to GTM 360 for free. So that is included. Again, GTM 360 didn't have enough features for me to necessarily bring it up in this brief webinar. But those other tools you mentioned, Surveys 360 and Optimize 360 are both less expensive when bundled with GA360, but they can also be bought as a standalone product.
All right, and there was another question that came in. How does ITP affect remarketing in Open Exchange?
So essentially, for any user that has opted out of tracking in tools like Google Analytics, Google Analytics simply will not add that user to your audiences in Ad Exchange or Open Exchange, excuse me. So it does have an impact if you're not collecting data on users, and Google simply can't bucket them into remarketing audiences. So again, there are some workarounds. They're not necessarily easy. Some of them require some server-side cookies, but there are certainly ways of getting of still collecting data and having data confidence as an organization. But ITP, I would lump that into some of the very serious data governance laws and regulations out there, like GDPR in Europe and California Consumer Privacy Act. So ITP should really be lumped into that, and is another reason why an investment in analytics now, and with a partner that knows how to ensure you're compliant legally and still collecting data. I think that's further evidence that that's a good time to be thinking about your long-term analytics strategy.
I think that's all the questions.
Okay, cool. So thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. It's my first webinar in a while, so thanks for working through a few technical difficulties we had. But thanks again, and we'll be following up shortly with the recording and the slides. So have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.